PBB and with Line 5, with the dioxin and the Tittabawassee, the Kalamazoo River spill. You see a constant situation where the scientists have the information, but they're constrained by political forces that have financial control that make those decisions not as appropriate as possible. I think PBB is a good example of that.
Thank you. And maybe I just introduce you. I'm sorry.
Can you repeat your question, Ed? We couldn't quite hear.
Oh, you were closer. Do you want to repeat the question?
Oh, there wasn't really a question.
It was more a comment about
Yeah,
the.
about politics.
Yeah, it was more a question about the politics.
Yeah, they were just
Not
waiting for you.
so much a
It wasn't a
It
question.
was just a
Okay.
comment. So maybe we'd like to take a moment to do a brief introduction of our panelists and make sure we have enough time for you to make comments. And so many of you probably already now know our panelists because we've been around together. But just in case you just getting here, first of all, we have Dr. Tom Corbett. You saw Dr. Corbett as a somewhat younger man, and the film, Tom, has we're an anesthesiologist at University of Michigan at the time of the PBB accident. You saw his role there. Tom has also contributed a lot in our recent years to how we should be responding to events such as this. And also, as you may have noticed if you've gone by our table with books, out here, Tom has written a very timely book about where we are with the 50th anniversary. In addition to Tom, many of you probably have heard Dr. Michelle Marcus from Emory University. Dr. Marcus has worked with the PBB community. Some of you probably know her very well. If you've been to any of the events that Emory has held, conduct across the state to do follow-up with the PBB cohort, those people who were studied first beginning in the time that we saw the film, and we are still following up the health of many people in that initial cohort. And there also is going to be an example of the follow-up tomorrow afternoon. So if you're able to stay for that, we urge you to remain to the end of the day. And finally, we have Sveniola, who is, among his many claims to personal help us, the PBB community greatly. In the 1970s, he was a Michigan legislator, and he happens to be, we were very fortunate for many years, the longest serving Michigan legislator. Is that?
Just from my county. There are other people that serve longer than I.
But from
Shiawassee County.
County, which was one of the places where we had exposures, as in so much of the state. So with those quick introductions, maybe we should start. You want to make some initial comments, and then there are, I think, some questions more related just to bring out information. Just introduce yourself without me doing it.
Yeah, Dr. Tom Corbett just gave you a pretty nice introduction there. And so if anybody has any more questions about my background or anything, I'll be happy to answer them. But the comment about the documentary, it brought back a lot of memories, and memories of a lot of people who unfortunately are no longer with us. Doc Clark, Lou Tronley, and a number of others that contributed so much but aren't here this evening, unfortunately. We so they compared one group of farmers with above quarantine levels, their symptoms, with those below quarantine level symptoms, but they all had high levels of PBB. They were all exposed to the same thing, maybe quite a little bit of difference in dosages, but both were sick. But they said since there was no difference between the two, it must be okay to eat it. It wasn't PBB that was causing the problems. That criticism of Dr. Meester led to the longer-term study that, again, was a problem. They continued it for until about the early 1990s, just at the time that it was 20 years after the first ingestion of PBB by the human population. And there was a study done on those figures up to that time by a group at MD Anderson Medical Center in Houston, and Dr. Hope and his group studied them. And they found, although the numbers were small because the numbers of cases were just starting to emerge, let me backtrack by saying that for a cancer-causing chemical, it usually takes, for most chemicals, a minimum of 20 years between the time they're exposed until somebody gets the cancer. So at 20 years, you might start to see an increase in cancers. Well, the group in Houston found a higher than expected incidence of gastrointestinal cancers. That includes esophagus, stomach, liver, and pancreas. They found a higher incidence of lymphomas. And they found a higher incidence of breast cancer in the group up to that time. Now, what should have been done was the study should have been continued for another, and people re-examined another 5 years later, and 10 years later, and 15 years later. And with a cancer-causing chemical, the longer you wait, the more cases you would expect to see. But for some unknown reason, the funding was discontinued for the study, and the whole thing was dropped. Fortunately, we have Dr. Michelle Marcus here, who picked up the study as it was just about totally extinct, and resurrected it, and is continuing the studies, and has now found a number of new findings, including endocrine disrupting properties of PBB and other chemicals in the environment, which raises the question. Michigan is a microcosm of what's happening on the whole planet. There are numerous toxic chemicals. PBB is just one of the early ones that was discovered and is being investigated, but to this point still has not been investigated very well. There's been a lot of resistance to funding studies to study the farmers, their families, and especially the chemical workers at Michigan Chemical, and people in St. Louis who were exposed to not only PBB, but DDT and TRIS and probably 100 other chemicals of varying toxicity. And an interesting fact to note is that the average lifespan of someone living in St. Louis, Michigan is 3 years less than the rest of Gratiot County, and essentially 3 years less than the entire population of Michigan. There's something that is making people not live as long, and the most reasonable conclusion or suspicion would be the chemicals from the plant. But yet, the whole population of St. Louis has been totally neglected in terms of having been surveyed. They should have had, with this high suspicion of toxicity, periodic examinations for the residents of St. Louis, like the asbestos workers, people who were exposed to asbestos. There's a legal requirement now that they be examined every year for either mesothelioma, lung cancer, or other cancers caused by asbestos. The same thing should be going on for people involved in these high-level exposures to toxic chemicals, but nothing has been done. I'm hoping that perhaps with the work that we're doing here, we will raise the concern of people who fund the money to study these things so that studies like those of Dr. Marcus can be funded and carried on, and we can find out essentially what's happening to all these people. I think maybe I've used up my time. I'll pass this over to Dr. Marcus.
So, it's a very disturbing film, and for those of us who were not aware of what was happening at the time, it's very disturbing to see. I have had the great honor you, that I feel that it's the most valuable thing we can do is to honor the community's voice and listen to the people in the community. And I know, there's talk about, well, there were corrupt politicians at the time, but now things are better. It's up to us to hold our officials accountable. And I have to say, I have to point to Jane Jelinek there, who, in the Pine River Superfund Citizens Task Force, who insisted over more than 20 years that EPA clean up the Superfund site in St. Louis properly. And it was really amazing today. I went on the tour with the EPA and their current work to hear the EPA officials say that the first attempt at remediation was really not done well, and to admit that it wasn't done well. And it's only because of Jane and the rest of the Pine River group that held EPA accountable. And I think that's the only way that we can move forward as citizens, is to be aware, to educate ourselves about what we're being exposed to, and to demand that our officials are responsible in doing their jobs and to hold these companies accountable. We talked about, Velsicol went bankrupt, and they gave, $38 million, and were able to leave the state. And now it's cost almost $500 million to remediate the site. And that's not including no one's paying for the health care of the individuals who were harmed by this. And we have to do better than that. I think we have to hold these companies accountable. We have to make sure that our officials are acting in our best interests, or vote them out, So that's one thing I want to say, that I have been struck by how powerful this community has been in holding officials accountable and insisting on getting a proper cleanup. I still hold out hope that someday someone's going to figure out how to hold Velsicol accountable, because if you go to their website, they boast about being a world leader in responsible chemical engineering, and they have a 100-year history, and they're a multi-billion-dollar company now, and here we all are, trying to make sure that there's safe water for St. Louis, and that doctors in the state understand how PBB impacted everyone's health. And we can't give up. We really have to continue to fight about PBB and about all of the other chemicals that we're being exposed to. And I know Elena Konis, I don't know if she's here, talked about, the explosion, there you are, the explosion of synthetic chemicals that have entered commerce in the last 100 years. I mean, there are literally hundreds of thousands of chemicals that have been introduced into our lives without any testing. I mean, such a small percentage of these chemicals have actually been tested for toxicity. And we are the experiment. And many of these chemicals, we regulate them one at a time. So after 20 years of research, we say, okay, this chemical is a bad actor because so many people have developed cancer or reproductive structure, and then it's marketed all over again. So we no longer make PBB, but we make PBDE. It's a very similar chemical and has very similar effects. I don't know if any of you have heard of BPA or bisphenol A, which has been shown it was actually originally synthesized to be a synthetic estrogen, and it wasn't regulated, but because of really pressure from the community, from the public, they've taken it off the market, but they've substituted BPS, which in animal studies is more toxic than BPA, and it doesn't have to be disclosed that there's BPS lining the cans of food that you buy and in a lot of other products and plastics. So I feel like the bigger picture here is how do we as a community protect ourselves from the onslaught of all of these chemicals, and the next accident is just waiting to happen. We saw about the train derailment in Ohio, and of course the lead in Flint, and I think we just have to take a different approach, and we just have to say, we don't want to be guinea pigs anymore. We really want to have a more responsible approach to the introduction of all of these toxic chemicals into our environment.
It's a pleasure for me and an honor for me to be up here on this platform with two eminent scientists and two very fine people. I'm the only non-scientist up here. I'm a political science history major, so I depend on these two people like them to show me the way. But I want to tell you that, and I hope I didn't show the angry side of me here.
Oh, go ahead.
In watching that film, in going over some of the things that I was part of, and of course, much of the film was taken before I was in office, but let me tell you, I was angry and enraged again in watching. And I said to myself, as I have 100,000 times in the last few years, well, let me put it this way. Did you ever hear the musical group Chicago? I'm sure you have. Well, they have a tune that goes something like this. Does anybody really know what time it is? Sincerely. We're making some headway, obviously, and these two wonderful people next to me have talked about that. But we certainly aren't making headway in many other areas. My oldest son is working on PFAS. And if you think PBB is a bad one, as a non-scientist, I'll tell you from what I know, it is horrible. And I sit here saying, well, how am I going to tell these folks what I really think they need to do and do it in a way that's effective? And I guess I'm going to have to just lay it on the line as I see it, okay? We need all of the scientists that we can get that are honest and decent like these folks here. And you know what else we need? We need politicians that are told that they need to do their job. And if they don't, you get rid of them. Period. powerful people with money and powerful politicians with money telling you that you don't know what you're talking about and telling you to shut up, okay? And harassing you and your family, okay? It's not fun. But let me tell you something else. And I don't know who said this, but I found this quote I want you to hear. If you accept the call to leadership, I'm talking about politicians now, you must be willing to be misrepresented, criticized, opposed, accused, and even rejected. It takes a ton of guts to stand up to your colleagues who can't stand you. It takes a ton of guts to stand up to people who are calling you every name in the book. And I could write a book about that on this PBB stuff, okay? So I guess what I'm trying to say here is when you pick a person to represent you, you make sure that they're going to be honest about the way they conduct themselves, and they're not going to be taken aside and bamboozled, as many were when I was in office, and as many more are today. And the other thing that I think you need to understand, and this movie tells me this, and all that I've seen since my days working on PBB, is that most of you out here don't really understand how powerful you are. Hear me. You are far more powerful than you think you are. You can make people like me who serve in office, you can make us do our job. Because you know what people in office want more than anything else under the sun? They want to be reelected. Excuse me. And you just want to tell these people that you want someone representing you that is honest, will do the job, and you will give them your vote. And if you let them know that you're going to organize and demand that they do the proper thing, let me tell you, many of them will come around. Many will come around. And I just can't begin to tell you how disturbed I am to see that we really have learned nothing in 50 years. Excuse me. My oldest son is working on this PFAS material. And I see the same stuff happening again and again and again. And where are we? And I can tell you this, that the people up in Oscoda, my son has a cottage where this first was found, were not very active at first. But you go up there today, and you talk to the people up there, and you understand that they're making their voices heard. And that's what you've got to do. You've got to let the public know, or let the officials know, that you're not going to put up with the kind of stuff that's going on. It's a horrible thing for me to have to say that after 50 years of this, that I have to quote Yogi Berra and say this like deja vu all over again. Same thing's happening. So please, please, don't underestimate your strength. And I think my friend Edie Clark was trying to tell you that this morning. Please don't underestimate your strength. And again, here's another quote that I found that I think maybe would be very helpful to you. And it wasn't about somehow what I'm trying to say. It wasn't about a chemical. I found it excuses for any politician, from president on down to a city councilman, not to make our safety their number one priority right now. And I think that tells you the way I feel about it. And let me tell you one more thing. And this, and I have not shared this with too many people over the last 40 or 50 years. My wife's family are farmers. Her uncles, cousins. And I remember one of her relatives talking to the local newspaper about how stupid yours truly was. Okay? Well, that was pretty darn hard to take. And I'm not here to cry about it. I'm just trying to tell you that people you put in office are put under that kind of pressure. And if they're doing their job, you tell them so, whether they're Democrats or Republicans. Thank you very much.
Just thank you all for those. And I at least was asked to ask something by someone, and I think it does follow up on this. But some of your comments remind me of something that was on the film, by the way, that I think ought to get, maybe should get mentioned. The attorney, the assistant attorney general, I guess it was, Stu Freeman, who was shown on there, who unfortunately Stu died a few years ago. I used to have Stu talk to my classes about this, and he would sort of apologize and say, the problem with the whole PBB thing, and I think in some ways relates to some of the comments you have made, and you comment on the situation. He said, our problem is, at least from the Attorney General's office in this era, is we were trying to have a corporate execution. He said, instead, we allowed them to divert us into killing St. Louis. Now, that's an oversimplification and all that, but it just, you know, the process was trying to get rid, to punish the real guilty party, which was Belsicol. I always remember that there were a lot of other people who fouled up, but Belsicol did this. You know, they were careless, as you saw in the film, you know, dirty, you know, and all that. But they walked away with a token punishment and got out of the state, you know. And then we, sort of rightly, sometimes, because we hear about this, are mad, you know, public health department, the EPA, or whoever, who don't do enough. And there are times they didn't do enough. But, you know, Belsicol did this. You know, nobody else did. And I just wonder their thoughts about how we keep the focus. I mean, and you've all alluded to it, so I'm not saying you didn't deal with this, but do you have any thoughts? I mean, what's our problem with, you know, again, Belsicol did it, and they actually are still selling chemicals. They sold the formula for Firemaster for a profit to another major chemical company that still operates and still sells Firemaster, apparently. So they're happy.
It's a slightly different formula.
Yeah, it's a different formula. You know, they said they got paid for the trade name. So anyway, I'll let you talk. I'm just the moderator.
Well, it's interesting what you said about when Firemaster, the polybrominated biphenyls was banned. They sold the brand name to another chemical company in Illinois. And what they did, the Firemaster polybrominated biphenyl molecule is two carbon rings with bromines put on. So they couldn't make that anymore. So what they did, they just cut it in half. They took one ring instead of two, and brominated that, and they're selling that now as Firemaster. They can still get away with it. It's probably just as toxic, if not more toxic, than the original Firemaster.
you know, we're playing chemical whack-a-mole, and we, you know, we deal with one chemical at a time, and now we're all exposed to hundreds of chemicals. You know, I think Corey Gretsch this morning from MDHHS talked about NHANES. That's the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey. So this study that's conducted by the CDC, they take a sample, a representative sample of Americans, and they test their blood for hundreds of chemicals. There is no one who is unexposed in this country. And, you know, another organization came out and said that children today are being born pre-polluted. It's everywhere. It's in all of us. You know, unfortunately, the PBB incident was unusual in the magnitude of the amount of this toxic chemical that was distributed throughout the state, and we have myself and other our research group at Emory and other research groups have documented significant health effects, including several types of cancers, thyroid problems, endocrine disruption, reproductive problems, but it's taken us all of this time to document those health effects, and yet we are being exposed to many, many other chemicals at lower levels, but they are all accumulating in us and accumulating in our environment. And no one's doing anything about it. I think, you know, we just have to say somehow, and the power is with all of us, to say we don't want to tolerate this anymore. We want to know what's in our food. So, for example, you know, companies don't have to disclose what chemicals are in your shampoo, your toothpaste, your dental floss. I mean, how many of you know that there's probably PFAS in your dental floss? They don't have to tell you that they add PFAS to your dental floss. We don't even have the information to protect our health. My daughter is expecting her first child. I'm going to be a grandma. I am so thrilled. But I talk to her every day, and I say, you know, don't use nail polish, don't dye your hair, don't microwave plastic, you know, don't put plastic in the dishwasher, don't eat microwave popcorn, because I know as an environmental scientist that there are chemicals that are harmful in each of these actions. How many of you know that? You know, this is not general knowledge, and it doesn't have to be disclosed. When you microwave your popcorn, it doesn't say the bag is lined with PFAS, but it is. And you're getting exposed when you eat microwave popcorn. My colleague, Melanie Pearson, did a study years ago where they put children on an organic food diet for 2 weeks. They measured levels of pesticides in the children's urine and then put them on an organic food diet for 2 weeks. And they saw the pesticide levels go way down. And then when they went back to their normal diet, pesticide levels in their urine shot up. I mean, this is what we're living with today. And it scares me. It scares me for
regarding all of us, and I quote him, you should probably say this instead of me, but Tom says, actions of these chemicals have the potential of changing our thought processes, our culture, and even evolution itself. Don't think about it. If that doesn't scare the living daylights out of you, I don't know what would. For crying out loud, we're talking about altering humanity. You know, in an unscientist word. Altering humanity. And I have to be concerned that my great-grandchildren have to be living in this kind of stuff with this kind of stuff. It's unbelievable what I've been reading, at least to me it's unbelievable. As I told you, my son is working on this PFAS stuff, and with some material he gave me, I can't begin to tell you where I read this. But PFAS is so pervasive, according to this that I read, that it is even found, get this, in polar bears in the Arctic region. For the love of God, if that doesn't scare the daylights out of you, I don't know what, because it is everywhere. Everywhere. How do we deal with it? Got to educate people. My son would call me up and tell me, Dad, don't use this kind of dental okay? And he called me up one time and said, no, there's a sparkling water that has PFAS in it. Don't buy it. And I had already bought 2 cases of it. So I went and dumped it out. Didn't turn it in and dumped it out. I see a hand up here.
Is there a list of things to help just average people to know what
I
to do?
can't
Because we
honestly
don't have
answer.
scientists calling us.
But I think there's a place to find it.
Is there a list?
Yeah, and we're trying to compile some of this information because we have heard from many of you over the years that your doctors don't know anything about PBB and don't understand how this exposure might impact your health. So we're developing a continuing medical education course for healthcare providers to educate them, and we are providing a set of resources, both for the healthcare providers, but also for for individuals. There are a number of sites with authoritative information. So one really excellent source is NIEHS, which is the National Institute for Environmental Health Sciences, and they have funded our research on PBB for the past 20 years. And they have a very good website with information about various chemicals. Another source is the Environmental Working Group, which is a nonprofit organization that does test a lot of products, and they compile information on various products and the chemicals that they contain and what is known about the toxicity of those chemicals. The EPA also has a lot of this information on their website. So there are a number of places where you can get good information about these various exposures and products.
Can I just say something quick? A lot of us feel real paralyzed because there's so much information and so many dangers and so many angles and so many combinations of things. I just want to say something positive, that other countries aren't so screwed and controlled by corporations as we are. Other countries have bans on a lot of the chemicals that we pour into our food and pour into our kids. and it can work.
Right.
Other countries can do it. They're behind it. They have their own issues too, but it can change.
So the European Union has instituted a program called the REACH program, I think it is, where any new chemical that you want to introduce into commerce has to be tested for toxicity first. And so we have a law that Toxic Substances Control Act in the U.S. That has moved in that direction, but they're still grandfathering in tons of chemicals and are moving at a very slow pace in requiring toxicity testing. You know, when you feel overwhelmed, and you can easily feel overwhelmed by this, I'm always reminded of a great Talmudic scholar who said, it is not up to you to complete the task, but neither are you free to desist from contributing towards completing that task. I think all of us have a responsibility to do what we can to fight for our health and our children's health and our grandchildren's health.
I want to thank our panelists really for their insights, especially after we saw the film, but I think this has added so much to it. So we're really grateful that they're willing to introduce them. I wish we had an hour or two more to benefit from it, but I know we are starting tomorrow at 9 back here, and many of us are all going to be back on panels tomorrow, so you can save questions for them.
Yeah. Just a few logistical things. If you are staying in the hospitality suites, the checkout time is 11 o'clock. So if you want to get your stuff into your car, if that doesn't work, let Ben or I know. There's still some leftover lunch there. If you want a late night snack, please take that. And anything else? Well, this was a wonderful day. I learned so much. It was so moving hearing your stories. Come back tomorrow for some more.
And let's thank our panel.
And thank our panel.